Hello everyone, David here. I'm back again, this time just to talk about something that I think is cool, and that thing is the Nintendo 3DS. This model is the new 3DS XL, so it's the model that came out a bit later and has a bigger screen. And I just think it's really neat, still now in 2022 and going forwards, because it has a stereoscopic screen and nothing else does anymore. So if you want to play the 3D games, this is the way to do it. But anyway, I'll dig into the console a little bit more and talk about some of my favourite games, and you will be able to view them with the 3D effect if you're watching this on something like a VR headset or a stereoscopic display, because this is a 3D YouTube video, so you'll be able to see it too. Okay, let's go. So the first thing to talk about is the 3D display. If you want to play games nowadays with a 3D effect, your options are really limited. You can use a virtual reality headset, and of course that's proper stereoscopic 3D. Or you could play 3DS games in an emulator on your PC and view them in VR using something like Virtual Desktop, and that will work. Or maybe you can use some old software like the NVIDIA shutter glasses to view things with a high enough refresh rate monitor or a stereoscopic monitor, but that's not very well supported nowadays. So really the 3DS is your only valid option for stereoscopic gaming if you're not including VR. What I like is that Nintendo really improved the 3D effect on the later models. So the first 3DS came out in 2011 here in the UK, and then they released a new 3DS in 2015, and that included a feature called Super Stable 3D. Basically, it uses the webcam up here to do some face tracking, so it knows where your head is, and then instead of just requiring you to fix your head in exactly the right position to view the 3D effect, it actually allows the screen to adjust and send the 3D view towards your face, wherever it is. So you get a little bit of leeway moving the device left to right and even up and down a bit. And that actually really made the 3D effect so much more comfortable to use, and it's something I really wish it had shipped with back in 2011, because I think a lot of people would have really liked it, and it might have given 3D a bit more of a boost. But if you pick up a new 3DS, you will get the Super Stable 3D, and it just makes playing the games with that 3D effect so much nicer. I should say that not all games support stereoscopic 3D on the 3DS. Something like Dragon Quest VII does, and it looks pretty cool, but sadly Dragon Quest VIII does not. So it's worth doing a quick Google online to find out if your favourite games support 3D or not, if that's a deal breaker for you. I've been thinking about why I like the 3D effect, and it's difficult to put into words, but I'll try. And I think it's because with that extra dimension, it really feels like the objects in the display are that much more tangible, almost like I really could reach out and touch them. And for me, that makes it more fun to play in a world where I feel like the things are more real. Now, if you don't like the 3D effect, either you just don't like it, or you can't perceive it, or maybe it gives you a headache to look at it because you are essentially tricking your eyes into perceiving 3D, then that's totally a valid point of view as well. But yeah, for me, it really works, and I think there are other people who like the 3D effect as well, and are kind of sad to see it gone in modern consoles. Some other cool features of the new 3DS are that it has the C stick built in, so in some games it uses this stick for a second analog stick, so you can move the camera around or do some other adjustments. And it included these extra ZL and ZR buttons, which I found are not used very much in games at all, but it's kind of nice to have them all integrated in a single device. And if you are going to buy a new 3DS, try and find one that has IPS screens. They weren't all shipped with exactly the same hardware. If you're really lucky, you'll find one that has IPS top and bottom. But try and get one with a top IPS screen if you can. It just has slightly better viewing angles, and they say that the colours look better. But to be honest, if you get one with a TN screen, it's still going to look good. The next thing I want to talk about is comfort, and I've found that when I'm playing on my 3DS, I tend to avoid a bit of neck strain that I get on some of my other handhelds. And I think it's because my hands are down here on the controls, and the main screen that I look at 98% of the time is slightly higher, so that just kind of encourages me to look up a bit more at it. Whereas when I'm playing for a decent amount of time on my Switch, I find I'm sort of looking more downwards, and the same effect on my Steam Deck. So after I've been playing on Switch or Steam Deck for an hour, I can come away with a slight aching neck, that I don't get on the 3DS. And of course, this is also lighter, which I really like. Now, all of this comes at the cost of it being an older console and not as powerful, and it won't play modern games or really any new games, because people are not releasing games for the 3DS anymore. But it still has a really good games library. And because I haven't really played any of the 3DS games since it first came out in 2011, I'm finding there's a whole plethora of games that I can now catch up on, go and find out about them and play through them now. The next thing I want to talk about is portability. And the 3DS, when it's folded up, gets pretty small. In comparison to the Switch, it's a bit narrower, a little less tall, slightly thicker, but I find that doesn't really make a big deal. But it is absolutely dwarfed by the Steam Deck in any dimension. So whereas this is a little bit of an effort to get in its carry case and carry around in my rucksack, this is not much at all. And especially if I put it inside its dedicated carrying case, so I know it's nicely protected as well, this is not really much of an imposition to chuck in my rucksack and carry on my way. The other benefit of taking my 3DS with me is that I might get a street pass, and it is really fun seeing that green light light up and just let me know that I've encountered someone else on my travels, and then seeing them appear in the Mii Plaza and having them try and free me from the dungeon. The final thing I want to talk about is the battery life, which is just that it's really good. I've never had the 3DS run out of charge on me, and I've got a good 3 more hours of gameplay. But yeah, as I said, I've never really put it to the test. Whereas with the Switch, I have managed to run this down. Less so with the newer model, because I find that's a bit more efficient with its newer processor. And the Steam Deck, I have run out of charge regularly. So I find if I'm playing a AAA game on this, then I can run it down in an hour and a bit. And also it gets very hot and I can hear the fan going, so it can be a little bit disconcerting. And kind of an addendum to that is just that it is a silent machine. There's no fan that needs to spin up when it gets hot. So I really like that there's no distraction, whereas with the Steam Deck, you can hear the fan spinning up sometimes and it can just slightly take you out of the game. With this, you're a bit more immersed. So I don't want to labour this point because I don't condone piracy in any way. In fact, I'm a games developer myself, so I really hate it. But it is easy to install custom firmware on a 3DS. You don't need to solder anything or short anything out with a paperclip. You can do it all through software and through moving files around on the SD card. And there are some really cool homebrew applications you can download and install on your 3DS as well. My favourite is probably Checkpoint, which lets you save and restore save games from the different games that you have. Universal Updater, which lets you update the homebrew and go and download new applications to download. There's theme managers if you want to completely make your 3DS home screen look different. FTPD is useful for transferring files back and forth, and it can actually be a little bit quicker than doing it through the system settings. And it means you can use an FTP client, which can be very convenient. There's a YouTube player. There's access to some emulators and things. And probably my favorite is Pico Drive, which is a really good Mega Drive emulator for new 3DSs. It doesn't work quite as well on the old models, but for the new ones, it's really great. I think the biggest thing that the 3DS is missing is Bluetooth audio support. So if you want to play on a plane and have noise cancellation with your AirPods on, you can't do it with the basic hardware. You need to get some kind of dongle like this. So this is the AirFly, and it does have a headphone jack. So, I mean, you can use wired headphones, but if you plug in a dongle like this, you can then use it with your AirPods, and it's actually pretty good. You just need to make sure the volume is cranked quite high to actually get it to send the audio through wireless. So it's a little bit of an annoying workaround, but it does then work very well once you get it set up. Anyway, enough of my ranting, let's actually talk about some games. And I want to show you a bit of footage just from some of my favourite games for the system. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list. I've captured the footage using the emulator Citra, and I'll display it so that the top screen is big over on your left-hand side, and you should get the 3D effect if you're watching it in some 3D capable way, and the touch screen will be smaller over to the right-hand side. Okay, enjoy!
Here we go!
Super Mario 3D Land. Well, I think we have to start here with the impeccable Mario platformer for the system. It actually wasn't a release title, but kept gamers waiting some 6 months before it finally dropped. It showcases a best-in-class use of stereoscopic 3D, actually exploiting it in its own game design. You rely on your own awareness of depth to better place your jumps, and you can see where some floating items are located without having to rely solely on the shadow they cast on the ground. It oozes Nintendo charm, and if you get a 3DS, you kind of have to get this game at the very least. It plays a bit slow compared to the more recent Super Mario 3D World on the Switch, but it still has plenty of tricks up its sleeve and interesting power-ups to keep you occupied. Zelda, the Ocarina of Time. This game is widely regarded as a masterpiece, and by many, the greatest game of all time, even 24 years after its initial release on the N64. This was one of the first titles I bought, and I played this game to completion on my 3DS. I actually love the old-school game design. It can seem a bit brutal at times, but I appreciate how it doesn't try to hold your hand all the time, and gives you a fair shot with the bosses if you can make sure you've upgraded your magic and you have a fairy or two stashed away in a bottle to revive you. Nintendo gave this a great polish when they re-released it for the 3DS, and I think this is the definitive version to play, since it also has stereo 3D support. In this version, there are now some optional hints to guide you in the right direction if you get stuck, which was a clever move by Nintendo to make this accessible to all. Zelda, Majora's Mask. I suppose this one is less universally loved than Ocarina, and I have to admit I have a hard time getting into it myself, but it looks and still feels great on the 3DS. I think the gothic style of the world can be a bit off-putting, and I don't particularly like running around as Deku Link myself, although I can see a great deal of thought went into how you use the different creatures' powers when you don their masks. If you're a Zelda fan, you'll want to give this one a try as well. Some people love it even more than Ocarina, I think in part because of its innovative time travelling, and that it feels like a really different kind of entry into the series. Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. Fire Emblem had 3 fantastic hits on the 3DS, with this one, Awakening, and Fates. Awakening actually has the highest Metascore of the lot, scoring a whopping 92 average review score, but for some reason I started playing this one, and now I want to finish it. The turn-based tactics are very thoughtfully balanced, and the story unravels through the perspectives of 2 protagonists as they both fight to repel the invading forces of Duma. I've been playing on casual myself, but if you're a glutton for punishment, you can switch to classic mode and experience the permadeath of your units, and I expect the corresponding sense of achievement when you win as well. The voice acting is classy, and it helps the huge roster of characters to stay memorable as you adventure with them. I also enjoyed the 3D dungeon crawling, a bit reminiscent of Zelda, and well integrated into the turn-based sections. Dead or Alive, Dimensions. I have to admit, when this initially came out, I was a bit of a resolution snob and didn't pick it up for my 3DS at the time. But since then, I've learned to love it. I think if you like fighting games, you probably have one which you are particularly tuned to, and it seems like Dead or Alive is the one for me. A generously long set of campaigns are available here in story mode, along with arcade, survival mode, and even some very entertaining tag battles, where you play with the computer against one tough opponent or another tag team. It also has online modes, but I doubt you'll find players online to play with these days. Team Ninja did an impressive job squeezing down the graphics of their console versions onto the handheld, and I think this one goes a bit underappreciated as a solid 3DS title. Zelda, A Link Between Worlds. Not content to rest on their laurels, re-releasing classic Zelda titles, Nintendo developed this completely new entry to the series using a top-down view similar to Link to the Past, and enabled 3D stereo to give it a wonderful diorama-esque aesthetic. Link's new ability to collapse into the walls is used very creatively, and when you finally solve a difficult puzzle or discover a tantalizing secret area using it, it's very satisfying. It just looks gorgeous all the time and hits all the notes Zelda fans wanted. Don't miss it. Zelda Triforce Heroes. This is a bit of an oddball title really. It's a Zelda title in a similar style to A Link Between Worlds, but entirely designed around 3-player cooperative play. If you can find 2 other players to play with you, you are in for the time of your lives, because the puzzles require all of you to work together and contain that usual Zelda charm, accompanied by some of the best music I've ever heard in a video game. If you don't have the required number of friends, you can still play through it, but you'll have to jump from one character to the next in doppel mode, where they're represented as wooden dummies when not possessed by the player, which is okay, but definitely less fun than huddling around with your mates and bickering about how to solve the puzzles. Shin Megami Tensei 4. Be warned, this turn-based strategy and exploration game is highly addictive, and once you get past the hard-as-nails opening sequence where I had to rely on levelling up just to restore my health several times, a deep and expansive world appears. The juxtaposition of technology against the feudal Japanese setting makes it feel unique, and it's fun to learn the mechanics of the battle system so that you can slowly start to turn the encounters with monsters in your favour. The ability to parley with the monsters and occasionally convince them to leave, give you a gift, or even join your side will also have you attempting to befriend some curious beasts and then making even curiouser ones through the fusion system. It's a somewhat grim and bleak game world presented here, but a compelling one. New Super Mario Bros. 2. It's always interesting to see Nintendo revisit 2D Mario now that 3D is the established norm. Here the levels and control system are finely polished, and it will feel reassuringly familiar to any old-school Mario fans. The co-op mode makes it particularly fun if you can find a friend to play as Luigi. Apart from that, you might not find too many surprises, but you won't be disappointed by this title. Mario Kart 7. Well, I mean this in only a good way, but it's Mario Kart. Upgraded over the DS version with stereoscopic 3D, everything is present and correct, and it still feels great to drift around a corner building up a turbo boost, then let your kart fly down the straight. The tournaments are lovingly crafted for single player, and you can also do multiplayer both with local wireless play or over the internet. There is a kart customization system that doesn't particularly interest me, but might make kart mega fans happy. New to this version was the introduction of gliding, which is fine, and underwater sections which break up some of the tracks nicely. You probably know already if you want to play this or not, but it's a solid game. Persona Q2. At a time when the mainline Persona games seemed downright allergic to Nintendo consoles, we did get both Persona Q and, 4 years later, Q2, the latter of which features the Persona 5 cast which had become so popular among the fanbase. I have to admit, I loved playing through Persona 5 years ago on my PS4, and it makes me happy to see the gang back together, albeit without the English voice cast, in this title set about halfway through their initial adventure. This time it's mostly centred on a first-person dungeon crawling mechanic, which works pretty well for exploring and battling monsters, but I didn't love having to draw a map while I navigated. It seems like the perfect thing for a video game to do for you. It's not exactly the Persona from the main games, but might serve as a decent amuse-bouche until Persona 6 comes along. Kirby Planet Robobot. This game just brings a smile to my face whenever I play it. The levels are wonderfully constructed, and although I've never been a big fan of the amorphous pink blob that is the main character, it sure is fun to blast my way through this one. Kirby himself is quite nimble and can float through several dangers, but the highlight is definitely when you get into the robot suit and can blast your way through the opposing structures and enemies. The stereo 3D is very tastefully done, but not essential to gameplay, and the presentation and UI really gives it the cherry on top. Physical copies of this have become a little bit rare, but you can still pick it up from the eShop if you're quick. Stella Glow. A bit of a forgotten title, Stella Glow is a turn-based strategy game with a heavy character focus as you try to save and protect your friends. I haven't progressed massively through the story yet, but I can already tell there will be a few interesting twists and turns as it goes. If you like the kind of character-driven, anime-style strategy games and want something a bit different from Fire Emblem, give this one a look.
Will only improve more with experience.
So it's a little bit of a bummer that the Nintendo eShop is closing for the 3DS and Wii U, because there were some great games available on here, and actually some exclusive games available on the eShop. So if you're watching this video in time, before March 2023, I advise you to go and download a few of the eShop exclusive games if you can. In particular, I'd advise you to go and download Attack of the Friday Monsters, Hydroventure Spin Cycle, which actually uses the tilt mechanic of the 3DS, which I find really interesting, Crimson Shroud, and some of the 3D-ified Sega Mega Drive games like 3D Sonic the Hedgehog and 3D Streets of Rage 2. They're all really fun. And you can also find some old SNES games and things on the eShop as well. So I've got A Link to the Past for the SNES, which was the first Zelda game I played, and it's really great to have that on my 3DS as well. Okay, that's my Nintendo 3DS video. I hope it was entertaining on some level. What do you think? Do you have one and do you like it? Have I convinced you to buy one? Or do you hate it for some reason? I'd quite like to know why, so please leave me a message in the comments. I'd love Nintendo to make a newer, updated model with a higher resolution screen and maybe some other bells and whistles like Bluetooth audio support, which is really the main thing I think it's missing. But yeah, I don't think that's going to happen now. I sort of feel like we're committed to 2D for a while until the next wave of interest in stereoscopic 3D comes around in maybe another 10 years or so. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. And in the meantime, there's a lot of really interesting things happening in the VR space, so I kind of look forward to seeing where that goes and, you know, what new innovations we'll have in the near future. So yeah, I hope that was fun. Please leave me a like and you can help me out by subscribing to my channel. Okay, see you next time.